Good evening and welcome to the Drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/iHeartRadio station. I'm your host, Roman. We have a great show planned for you today, but first, forecast from our IntellectualRadio.com weather center today. Sunny and chilly, high 55 degrees. Tonight, clear and nippy, low 41 degrees. Tuesday, partly sunny and warm, high 66 degrees. Tomorrow night, cloudy with a chance of shower, late, warm, low 53 degrees. Wednesday, morning showers, then turning partly sunny, like the sun is trying to play tickaboo with us. Warm, high 64 degrees. Thursday, partly sunny, and there's a periodical shower and thunderstorms in the area in the afternoon. Break out the short sleeve shorts, shirts, flip flops, all of that because the high will be 70 degrees. Friday, cloudy and cool with an occasional shower, high 60 degrees. Over the weekend, Saturday, 85 degrees, partly sunny. And Sunday, a little bit cooler, 75 degrees. Possible thunderstorm here and there. The Drive at 5 is also part of the Monday night new lineup with a new show called Becoming Dateable at 11 a.m. Deals Business at 12 p.m. The Great Entrepreneurship at 6 p.m. New Black Leadership at 7 p.m. Dreammakers 365 at 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. Chronicles of Rum. Also, the Drive at 5 is also part of the fabulous 5 at 5 only on IntellectualRadio.com. The Drive at 5 is sponsored by Joshua Flynn and Associates. Get your insurance right now. Today, my guest is the Chief Operating Officer of Mindful TMS NeuroCare. Please give a Drive at 5 welcome to Teresa D. McKelvey. Welcome to the Drive.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeartRadio station your background.
Well, basically, I am currently the Chief Operating Officer for Mindful TMS.
You got to move up.
I need to move up. I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Great. Okay, so currently I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Mindful TMS NeuroCare Centers. It's a startup organization, and it's a clinic. TMS stands for Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation, and it's a clinic that's there to help patients that are suffering from depression and OCD. We also help patients that are suffering from anxiety, PTSD, and it's a non-medication treatment. So that's what I'm doing.
So please give an example of what is Mindful TMS NeuroCare.
So we are an organization. It's a non-medication treatment. It's an outpatient service. It's approved by the FDA since 2008 for depression. It just recently got approved for OCD in 2009. It's covered by insurance. There's over 1 million patients that have already been treated with TMS, and it has been successful. We have over a 70% success rate for patients that are suffering and undergoing TMS that has been going into remission. And we have over about 60% of the patients that are responding positively to TMS. So it's a new medication treatment. It's the third option, but we're hoping one day for it to become the first option. Because of course, the first option for patients that are suffering from depression and OCD is medication, and then they do therapy. But now this is a non-medication treatment for patients that are treatment resistant, because a lot of times patients who will have to go on medication. There's so many side effects, and there are no side effects with TMS. Well, minimal side effects because it takes a little bit for you to get used to. A patient may have a headache, but it kind of goes away with some Tylenol. So this is a treatment, especially for patients who have failed medication and just feeling hopeless.
There is a lot of mental illness affecting the African American community. However, we do not discuss mental illness. Mm-hmm. Why you think people are either ashamed or do not want to discuss mental illness?
For the most part, sometimes, especially in the African American community, we're very prideful people, very prideful in the African American community. No one wants to admit that something is wrong. And then when you do find out something is wrong, it's too late. You don't want to admit that it happened on your watch. So we just need to have more conversation surrounding it. We need to bring the resources for it to the forefront because, as you know, with government, with all of the things that are being cut, taxes are being increased like crazy, but they're cutting all of the programs. The first thing that always gets cut is mental illness. They're always cutting
But what
from that
why
population.
that is an scapegoat because it's affecting Cook County as a whole.
Yeah,
And once they start shutting it down, the crime has skyrocketed.
absolutely.
So what your organization is doing to tie it in together that when you close these facilities
hmm
and put them out on the street, you're going to have an increase in crime.
Yeah, you're gonna have an increase in crime. Then you have a patient of increase in severity of the symptoms is just as big as an increase in crime. But we have to control that. So what we do within our organization is we put the patients, we have them to come in for the transcranial magnetic stimulation, and basically what they do is they have to have 30 treatments. So they come in 5 days a week for 4 to 6 weeks, and we just kind of so it's not anything like shock therapy at all. This is no cognitive impairment. They can continue to do what it is they were doing after undergoing our treatment, and we just kind of educate them on the option that's available for them, and we try to give them the resources that they need so that they can go on and live healthy and happy lives.
Another element affecting the African American community is they look at church
hmm
as a therapeutic way of handling their own personal situation, while whites go to therapy. Why African Americans feel church is the answer. I don't want to go to TMS.
hmm
I'm going to go, grandma, my mom, they say, go to Jesus,
hmm
go to God, go talk to the pastor. You say,
I say the difference between the white community and the African American community is they understand that the pastor doesn't have a background in mental illness. You need someone who can actually help you. Yes, of course, I'm a faithful person just like you and anyone else, but at the end of the day, I am a realist. And the reality is someone who's suffering from mental illness, they need to seek help from someone who is a professional. Sometimes, and medication isn't a bad thing. It isn't. So they need something that can correct the issue that they're having, and to say, go pray about it. Yeah, you can pray about it, but prayer without work. You need to be able to pray, and you need to be able to seek the professional help that you need. So that's one of the difference. Another difference between the African American community and the white community is money. Some of these treatments cost money. If insurance is not paying for it, in the African American community, we don't have that much, insurance. So these treatments cost money. And so when you take away the money element, the only thing we have left is faith.
so let's say TMS,
hmm
for example. Let's say I have a medical card
Okay.
or a Medicaid card.
hmm
Can can you accept that?
So Medicaid actually will not start paying for TMS until January 31st. And then we will be able to accept Medicaid. That has
But what if a patient walks in and they are in dire need?
So my organization, what we try to do is we try to give a very good discount, because the last thing I want to do is turn patients away because of their inability to pay. But the reality is treatment costs money. So we do try to work with these patients. And even if I break it down to like the minimum, they'll still say, I can't afford it, because they don't believe that they've been so hopeless their entire lives. Most of them have um, never known what it is to want to do something. So now they've been taught that so many things don't work for them. And so now if I say I can charge you a fee for this, they're going to think that they're going to pay for something that's not going to work for them again. So a lot of times when I do try to work with patients, sometimes it still just don't work out because of the severe hopelessness that they've been experiencing their entire lives.
Anything legislative wise that can push this? I know, like you said, January 31st,
January,
but
I mean
that's
July
ju-
31st.
oh, you didn't say, you said January.
I'm sorry, I
Uh,
meant to say July
oh,
31st,
oh,
upcoming. It's
upcoming.
coming up.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, so that's reasonable. I was about to say my other question: why not force legislators to push this up?
Yeah, thank goodness they have been. There's been so many different advocates that have been working towards getting it covered by more insurance companies, because still not all of the insurance companies cover it, but most of them are, and people are jumping on board. But they are kind of like hesitant to make sure that this is a treatment that is working before everyone can get on board. Because, like I said, 2008 is when TMS was approved for depression. There have been so many case studies showing its success in OCD, in PTSD, in anxiety. It's still not covered for those, for those areas. TMS still is not covered for those areas that are showing signs of success. So it takes a little bit of time, because even the gap between 2008 for depression, it just got covered from OCD in 2018. That's a 10-year gap. So it's moving slow, but it is moving. And now more people are learning about TMS, more people are learning about the benefits. So now more people can begin to suggest it, and more people are beginning to believe in it.
According to the American Federation for Suicide Prevention, Black youth
Mm.
ages 10 to 19, the rate of male suicide
Mhm.
was 3 times higher than that of young Black females. It has been a growing number, but now more common in the African American households
Mhm.
than ever before.
Mhm.
Why you think that?
That's a tough question to answer, because there can be um, multiple reasons why that is, where the rate of suicide is increasing in the African American community amongst men. It could be one, can be economics. You know, almost 60% of the African American boys ages like 16 to 24 are unemployed. They just simply can't find a job. And when people aren't working and can't afford to feed their family, then you feel this sense of hopelessness, helplessness. Um, there is nothing. There's nothing that I can do. Our African American boys are in prisons higher rates of numbers than any other ethnic group. Um, the educational system. Our kids just aren't receiving the same adequate education that they're receiving around the world. So when there's no education, when there's no finances, when you're imprisoning um, our young boys at the rate that they're going to prison, it's kind of difficult to cope with life. So we have to dismantle that pipeline from schools to prison. Everyone says it all the time, but it's true. That's what needs to happen. We need to put adequate education in our community. That's what needs to happen. We need to put more um, jobs in our community that are jobs that people can afford to feed their families.
But people say jobs
Hmm.
is the answer. On a drive at five, we pressure politicians
Hmm.
that comes in here, and they say we need jobs. Well, you have access to jobs. Do something about it.
Yeah.
So I advocated for plenty of times. These people have the access and the abilities to do it. And a lot of people say jobs,
Hmm.
but there are some people say the jobs are there. They
Hmm.
just have to look for it.
So.
And it's kind of like they call the wolf pack,
Mhm.
then the coyotes. I feel African Americans are like the wolf pack and the coyotes.
Mhm.
The reason why I'm saying that is because they know how to adapt to any situation.
That is true.
And that's their thing. So if for decades I'm without a store, that convenience store, or I go outside my community,
Mhm.
doesn't phase me none.
Yeah.
I've been on the street corner selling drugs all this time. Why not?
Sometimes it gets old. Sometimes being out in the streets get old. Um, and everything is cyclical. Sometimes you're in a good mood, sometimes you're in a bad mood. Mood disorders and depression, bipolar, that's just kind of one of the stigmas that kind of surrounds our community. But as it relates to jobs and them bringing jobs into our community, they have to bring jobs into the community that will, let's see, that will be beneficial to our people. Because of course they'll throw us a bone and throw a grocery store in our community, and they'll say, hey, I gave you a bone, but that bone is our people working for $10 an hour, $11 an hour. You can't feed a family of four on $10 and $11 an hour. So you have people that can, I agree, can bring some resources. We want to be able to build up our community, but that's something that we have to fight for. One of the things that's different in our community, basically what we do is we have these meetings, we have the rallies, and everybody go fired up, but they don't have any paperwork to support it. So we'll go with our ideas to these politicians or our ideas with these business people, but then we say, okay, I gave you the idea, now you run with it. But what we have to learn how to do as a community is, if we say, okay, we want insurance companies, or we want grocery stores, or we want, Black owned businesses in our community, let's sit down and write the business plan. Let's talk about how we're going to do that. Let's talk about the resources that we can fund to put those things in our community. Because now, once we've sat down and had the opportunity to write out how we think this should look versus us having a conversation about how we think it should look, then that changes the game. So if we want the narrative to change, we have to write the narrative. We can't just go give our ideas. We have to say, okay, hey, this is my idea. This is how I think we should carry it out. These are the resources that I think will help us carry out this idea. But once you give them the idea, they'll do whatever they want to do with it, or not do anything with it at all. People take you seriously when you actually know what you're talking about, when you can cite your sources, when you can say, this is what we need to do. Here it is in writing why. And that's what I think kind of gets lost in translation from us in different communities, because everybody has what they want done. They have it written down. So when they give it to you, now you can't dismiss me, because now I have documented proof of what needs to happen to make my community thrive. And I think that's what we need to do as a people. We need to start writing it down, not just showing up with anger, with an idea, and then tell somebody else to carry it out.
In a 2013 article noted that Black women are less likely than any other American demographic to commit suicide. However, the number increased dramatically regarding Black women who have attempted or have suicide. They believe single motherhood protects Black women from suicide, and they believe the number would go higher if it was not for that reason. Your thoughts?
Wow. I definitely want to take a look at that article to see where it came from. I can't really articulate something about a 2013 article, but what I will say, as me being an African American woman, I am a mother. Thank goodness I never had to be a single mom, but I was raised by a single mom. And as a child that was raised by a single mom, I saw the resilience. I saw the having to make it happen for your child by any means necessary. And that's just basically who we are as women, who we are as mothers. If we know that we have a mouth to feed, we don't get to walk away. We don't get to send a monthly child support check, whatever it is. If it's, I don't know if it's 20% of the man's income. We don't have that ability. Not that we would, but we can't. We can't walk away. When that man is given 20% of his salary, 100% of our salary have to go towards that child. And as a mother, our instincts kick in. And the first thing we're going to do is protect our child, because we know, okay, if something happens to me, no one is going to raise my child or love my child the way that I will. So I'm going to make it happen by any means necessary.
So what you're saying is basically that it can be what you're relating to the aspect of the study have some truth to it.
Mm-hmm.
In one sense, the number could be higher if it wasn't for the motherhood making, you know, all means necessary for that child?
Well, I don't want to say that I think those numbers would be higher. Um, the the writer, whoever wrote the story, he may have done the research to think maybe that is true. I haven't seen that research or done it, so I can't say yes or no whether I think the numbers will be higher. But what I will say is, being an African American woman, majority of my friends are African American women, my family members. I don't see that to be true. I don't. I see. I was raised and I am always around strong Black women. So and I know suicide happens in our community. It does. Um, but the women that I was raised around, I didn't see it. That's not my reality. So I wouldn't be able to say that if these women didn't have children, that they would commit suicide. That I don't see that. But I'm not discounting what the writer wrote. I'm hoping that he did do the research to say something like that, but I can't I can't respond to that.
In a 2015 CDC study found that the suicide rate of Black children between the ages of 5 and 11 have tripled, and whites are declining. Suicide in the African American community has become the third leading cause of death among African Americans ages 15 and 24. Then it is considered itching up its
Mhm.
way to the second leading cause
Mm.
because of the increase. Should we call the Black suicide rate a national emergency?
I think so. I think it is a national emergency. When you see, I think suicide itself is a national emergency, but as it relates to the African American community, I would agree with you on that because the numbers are rising and they are increasing, especially if they are thinking about going to number two. It is alarming. It is alarming that we have so many children that are falling through the cracks. We have so many children that are in the educational system and educators aren't catching it. Educators aren't watching the warning signs to see what's going on with this child. Someone has to see that these children are experiencing hardships and they need to intervene. So that it definitely is a national emergency. One thing I will say is just on Friday, I just so happened to be in Cherokee County. I don't know if you saw, there were two students who had planned to, and these weren't African American students. It just so happened that I was there, so I just want to speak on it really briefly. There were two white students that were going to blow up a school. And thank goodness there was one of the students showed another student a map of the school. And that student, Spidey senses went up and said, "Who has a map of the school?" And then, of course, turned it over to the local police, the local school. The school turned it over to the police. They went and raided this child's home, and this child had all kind of stuff from the Columbine murders. This was a 17-year-old kid. We just did the 20-year anniversary of the Columbine murder like last month or month before last. So he wasn't even born when this happened. But this was a child who's suffering from bipolar disorder. So luckily, so someone has to check on these kids. The kid had a kill list of all of the kids that he wanted to kill. Unfortunately, most of the kids that were on that list were African American kids, and then one African American teacher. And then they just kind of went through the list of why each kid was on the kill list. One of the kids was on the kill list because he agitates them. The rest of the kids were on the kill list were mentally ill children, children who had special needs. One had Down syndrome, and I guess apparently the special needs kids was making fun of him. So he put all of these special needs kids on the list. So I said all of that to say there are warning signs, and us as adults, us as educators, us as family members are ignoring those warning signs.
Can you give us some of the warning signs? A lot of people say there are warning signs.
Yeah.
What are the warning signs?
So one of the warning signs would definitely be change in mood. Um, it could also be like a change in appetite, change in sleep patterns, um, when you kind of just start excluding yourself from everything, when you're not participating in family functions, when you're not returning your family members' phone calls. And I know some people say, hey, some family members you just don't want to be bothered with. But we're talking about when they do it a little bit more than usual, when you see someone that's vibrant and the next thing you know, they're not, and it's lingering on for too long. One of the warning signs that I read about a month ago was people who move a lot is a warning sign. And I found that to be so bizarre.
Are you talking about like
Move,
move like
pack up and move from apartment to apartment to apartment. They say that's a warning sign of someone who's depressed and could possibly be suicidal because now you can't get situated in life. And when you are having that problem of getting situated in life, then that's when those suicidal thoughts occur. The most people that have, that commit suicide have depression. It comes from, substance abuse. It also comes from bipolar disorder. Like those are the um,
could
three
it also
elements.
be hereditary as well?
Yeah, it could definitely be hereditary. Genes play a factor. Lifestyle plays a factor. Um, and it's just a multitude of things that people unfortunately are not looking for, and we need to start paying attention.
Many children are committing suicide, majority because of social media bullying. Why there is a dramatic uptick in African American children committing suicide due to social media bullying?
Wow, that's such an interesting question because for the most part, when you start talking about cyberbullying, um, one, parents need to intervene because you see your niece or nephew, your son or your daughter on cyber or on the internet bullying someone, but sometimes we kind of like chop it up as children being children, and we don't take it as seriously as we should. And then in the educators don't take it as seriously as they should as well. And it's easy to say just turn the computer off and no more cyberbullying, but that's not the case because once it's out there in the world for the media to see, or for the on the internet for the world to see rather, um, now they're talking about it in school. Now the kids are making jokes about it. Now everybody's ganging up on it. And social media can be cruel. I mean, I know me, for instance, I had said something to one of my friends on social media, and it was a friend who it was a comment to that friend, but then everybody started chiming in and it just kind of exacerbated the situation. And luckily for me, I'm a strong willed person and I eventually just started ignoring the comments. But my comment was to a friend. So then when you have everybody that kind of like gets in, it blows up. And then now the bullying begins, and now this becomes a part of who you are because now you have to see these people in school every day, and now it's lingering on. It's not just a one day thing. Now it's going into tomorrow, and then everybody is catching on, and nobody's doing anything. And the teachers are aware. The teachers are
But
aware.
why they not doing anything? I mean, should they lose? Should there be? It goes back to what we talked about,
Hmm.
legislative.
Right.
If you're not doing the job, you say African American parents put paperwork,
Hmm.
you email to school saying my son or daughter is being bullied. My I talked to teacher such and such. We had a meeting. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Nothing is being done. There are African American parents that are doing that. Still, the child commits suicide. In too many of these cases.
So one thing I will say about why teachers, you know, aren't losing their jobs or things of that nature. And it will be because they're protected, by union guidelines. And it's very difficult to get a teacher in trouble. I mean, they can get reprimanded, and there's just this big old process that you have to go through. But it's very difficult to get a teacher in trouble, which is kind of unfortunate. Because your job, to me, when I was sitting on the school board, I would always tell people my job is to keep children safe first, and then I educate children second. Safety always come first to me. And in an environment where I am in and where I participate, I always try to put children first. And it's just an unfortunate situation. I wish I could do more. I wish I could say more about it. But parents need to, they just can't give up. They can't just say, okay, they're not doing anything, so I'm going to stop. You have to always be continuing to advocate for your child, even when they're in a situation where you feel like nothing is being done. And then that's when you get those educators, and not the educators, the legislators involved, and, do whatever you have to do to go over their head to the Board of Education and things of that nature. But it's unfortunate.
Due to the situation of social media bullying,
Mm-hmm.
there are some people that are homeschooled.
Mm-hmm.
More and more African Americans are doing homeschool.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm thinking is, when it comes down to it, I think there is 2 to 3 components. One of those components is bullying.
Mm-hmm.
The other component is basically the environment. Huh?
I said, I know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
Right, but go ahead, since you know.
No, I was thinking that you were going to say the educational system.
Yeah,
itself.
the educational system itself,
Mm-hmm.
but also the environment,
Mm-hmm.
the whole environment. You alluded to that because it leads to tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
One thing is for the right now, but it also leads to tomorrow. Your thoughts?
Well,
of why people are homeschooled.
So people are definitely homeschooling because of the education that the children are getting. And sometimes when you have children that are in public environment, there's just so much that you can actually teach in that environment, because you have some students that come back from so far that it takes so long for them to catch up. So parents want to make sure that their children, one, is getting that attention that they need, to the education that they need as well, to ensure that they are able to participate in the real world, tomorrow, to use your words. But I also think you can do both. I'm not a big advocate of homeschooling, only because school is what happens in the world. Once you get into the workplace, those are the same people that you're going to have to be around when you get in school. So you have to be able to socially adapt to environments. But just because a child go to school all day doesn't mean that a parent can't educate them at home as well. And I think a lot of parents, what they do is they send their child to school and then they're kind of hands off. My husband and I, we've never been those kind of parents. We've always taught our kids when they came home as well as what we wanted them to learn. If I felt like there was something that they wasn't learning in school, we definitely teach that at home. So a lot of parents too have to be willing to do both. But children need that social component, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to survive in life. They're going to have to be able to understand how to navigate the hallways, of school, because those are going to be the hallways of work. It's going to be those exact same people, and you can't escape it. So I understand why parents do it, but I'm just not a big advocate of homeschool.
The lack of resources in the Black community, the lack of loyalty in the Black community, the increase of separation between mother and father in the Black community, bullying, sexuality, fraud in relationship in the Black community, abandonment, lack of trust are the results of reasons why suicide among males. Am I right on the money on that?
Yeah. That's a lot, and I'm glad that you said all of those things, because people need to understand that those things are not in isolation. When people begin to commit suicide, it's a compilation of things. People don't just wake up and say, "Oh, I'm going to commit suicide today."
But a lot of people think that.
Yeah, a lot of people do think that, but depression is kind of like the underlying, reason why people are committing suicide. And like I said before, you just have to kind of watch the warning signs, mood disorders, anxiety, bipolar, things like that is the reason why, people commit suicide. But like I said, those things are not in isolation. They're a compilation of things where people are just tired of feeling hopeless. My father abandoned me. I'm not doing well in school. I'm having anxiety every time I'm around people. So it's a multitude of things to where people get to that. And so, yes, I do think you were right on the money with that.
Please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeartRadio station where they can get a hold of you and contact.
So I'm on LinkedIn, Teresa D. McKelvey. I'm on Facebook as Teresa Alexander McKelvey, and I am on Instagram. I think the real Teresa MCK. But what I would like for you to do is follow us online. We're Mindful TMS on we're Mindful TMS on all platforms, on LinkedIn, Instagram, and LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And our website is www.mindfultms.com. So if you know of someone who's feeling hopeless, someone that's feeling depressed, someone who's failed multiple medications, please give Mindful TMS a call.
Thank you so much for coming on the drive. Don't be a stranger.
Thank you. I will be back. And next time I'm going to have to ask you to email me those questions. Those were tough.
When we come back on the drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com / you made Earl chuckle right there. Please, when we come back on the drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com / iHeart Radio Station, we have the Vice President of the Political Action Committee for the Chicago West Side NAACP coming up on the drive. And we're back on the drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com / iHeart Radio Station, sponsored by Joshua Flynn and Associates Insurance. Get your insurance. My next guest is the second vice president of the Political Action Committee, part of the Chicago West Side NAACP. Please give a drive at 5 welcome on the intellectual line to Ramil Terry. Welcome to the drive.
How are you, Roman? Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. Please give IntellectualRadio.com / iHeart Radio Station your background.
So a little bit about me. I currently serve as the second vice president as well as the political action chair for the Chicago West Side NAACP. I've been with the organization a little bit over 10 years. Initially serving as the political action chair, and then shortly thereafter being elected to the second vice president position. I am a lifelong West Side Chicagoan. West Side, always have to shout out the West Side. And a lot of my work and experience professionally and personally has been rooted in social equity. Specifically for the Black community. I've done work in organizing on various issues, as well as reviewing and providing input on different legislation as it will benefit our community. So that's just a little bit about me. I don't know how much time I have to talk about me, so I won't take up that much.
Well, you're okay. But tell us a brief history of the West Side NAACP.
So the West Side NAACP started well before I was born. And it was first ran by a woman named Nola Bright, who has since passed on. And throughout the years, we've had various people serving as president. One notably is our current chairman, Mrs. Vera G. Davis. And we now have our current president, who has been president since I've been a part of the branch, Carl A. Brenton. So we've done a lot of work on various issues around education, health initiatives, the census, criminal justice, so a myriad of things. But I think most notably about our organization that I think is very important for people to know is that it's all volunteer based. So whereas you have a lot of organizations that do this sort of work that are receiving, either private funding or funding from the government, a lot of the work that we do at our branch is solely driven through volunteerism. So I myself, unfortunately couldn't be in the studio today because of that reason. I'm leaving work, but I do this, pretty full time. So it's like I have 2 full-time jobs.
Why the NAACP is so important now in our community in comparison to 10 years ago?
I don't know if it's in comparison to 10 years ago per se. However, I believe that it's always very important because we need to understand how to utilize organizations like the NAACP, especially from the legal perspective, right? You have a lot of different organizations out there and we all do different things. But even when you look beyond just like the Black community, there are other groups who have sort of like legal arms that sort of focus on those issues from a legal perspective. And I think that is what's very important about an organization like the NAACP. For instance, the recent consent decree that we hear a lot about in terms of that has been implemented, we were one of the plaintiffs on that lawsuit to ensure that that consent decree was upheld and implemented within the city of Chicago. Now, of course, there are, some things that we wanted to see that didn't necessarily make it into the final revision. However, organizations like the NAACP being at the table was very important so that they could take it seriously and understand that there are legal ramifications if you're not willing to sort of change your ways and do right by the community.
People who are listening to IntellectualRadio.com would say your organization was in as a past tense, a strong element to the Black community that presented change. However, they look outside and they see the same old, same old. Why the NAACP is not holding Black elected officials accountable who represents themselves as a change agent? What is your response to that?
Well, I wouldn't say that we aren't necessarily holding elected officials accountable. I believe that with every organization is just as strong as its members. So I would pose that question to those who are listening. What is their level of engagement in organizations such as the NAACP or any other organization that is out there doing said work? Because as I stated earlier, I'm a volunteer. Everyone within our organization is, our volunteers. And so for us to be a small group, we have been able to accomplish a lot. And so I'm really proud of the work that we're doing, but we can always do more with more people. I really do live by the motto, if we all did a little, we can get a lot done. So it's really an opportunity for us to do some self-reflection to say, hey, okay, I don't like what's happening. I don't like what I'm seeing. What am I doing to be a part of what is already happening? If not, start something on my own. So I really think it's more of how can we join in to ensure that organizations like the NAACP are as strong as possible, because again, we're volunteers, so it only can be as strong as those who are willing to do the work.
What is the most important issue the NAACP is focusing on right now so people can be aware of? You mentioned the consent decree, but there are other issues that deserves people's attention. Can you share that with us?
Yes, I would say currently we actually have a meeting where we'll be meeting on next Wednesday or this upcoming Wednesday to discuss census, right? So we know that the census is coming out in 2020, and we know that throughout the various years, we've been told how our population has significantly decreased. And so the census is very important for many reasons, not only regarding funding that comes from the federal government to our various states, and trickle down into the different municipalities. It's also very important in terms of representation, right? So we hear a lot about how if the Black population is shrinking, then we are at risk of losing congressional seats, right? And so we know that it's very important to have individuals in office who will represent your interests. So it's sort of those things that we want to really communicate to people, and also the dollar amount that is related to those numbers. So I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that over the course of 10 years for one person, it's like we lose out on $14,000 for like every person that's not counted. So that's a big, dollar amount. If you, multiply that by hundreds of thousands of people that won't be counted in this upcoming census. So I think that's one of the most important things, that we understand the importance of being counted, and understanding that they cannot, the government will not come after you if you, say, for instance, live in public housing and you have people who are living with you that shouldn't necessarily be residing with you. You documenting that information, the government will not come to your door and say, oh, you had these people in your household. So it's very important that we understand that those hard to count people are actually counted. And so that's a really important, I feel like, thing that we're working on right now. And if there's anyone listening in who has some sort of insight on some creative ways that we can engage our community, especially those in the hard to count populations, we're more than willing to have you be a part of our efforts.
You noted and you said earlier that the Black population is decreasing. There are some studies that are saying that the Black population is increasing, but they're not justified in the numbers. Can you elaborate on that? That's why it's very important on that.
Right. So like that hard to count population. So one being, like I just gave you an example of some individuals who may fear retaliation from their housing authorities, may not report people who are living with them who technically are not supposed to be there, right? That's a hard to count population. We also have this issue in our state, right? The home rule, where we have individuals who are currently incarcerated, but they'll be counted in our downstate counties because that's where they are serving their sentences. However, once these individuals are released, they come back to our communities. But unfortunately, those dollars or their numbers aren't being counted where they reside. They're being counted where they're, temporarily being housed. And so those are things and initiatives that we've tried to work on with via legislation at the state level to say, hey, we need these individuals counted here because this is where the resources need to be, right? Because if those resources are going downstate, but then they're coming back to the city of Chicago, to the west side, especially like Austin, I believe there was an article out years ago regarding how many people actually.
There's a very high number of recidivism rate in the Austin community.
Yeah, so you have those people coming back home, but then they're coming back home to no resources because those resources have been allocated elsewhere. So that's another example. And then we have individuals, who are either maybe staying with family members. They may not be residing on the street. So you have those individuals as well that are hard to count. So there's different levels of individuals that are very hard to. So to your point, there may be an increase, but that's not necessarily documented. What's being documented is that there's a significant increase in our population. And so one way to sort of address that is educating everyone, anyone that in your families, taking charge, being that ambassador, and just saying, hey, this is important.
All right. You are listening to IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station. On the intellectual line is Second Vice President of the Political Action Committee Chair, Ramil Terry. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thanks to Earl Winfrey, our executive producer, Wanda, who's behind the scenes. You guys have a wonderful week.